forgive me if I'm wrong here, but it feels like it's been a long time since you've had a lead role that's this meaty, and I'm wondering if there are any parallels between what's going on in your own life, in your real life, that attracted you to telling Joan Anderson's story on screen.
Well, I think that there are. My son is now 27, so he's been, he struck out in the world on his own, some time ago. But I feel like this is a very universal story, and pretty much all of my friends and acquaintances have all been going through this on one level or another for maybe the last 10 years. This sort of just transition away from, parenting in that kind of day-to-day, week-to-week way, and and watching their kids grow up and move out into the world and finding themselves faced with those, fascinating questions about what now, what next, and sometimes not even realizing the void that is being left in the wake of their children, creating their own lives. I found it a very, moving. I loved her book. I thought her book was a very courageous book. And very, her sense of self-examination was fascinating.
It also strikes me. I know that you live in the Berkshires. Do you still live there?
Well, I've had a place there. I've had a place for about 30 years, and I've sort of divided my time between New York City and the Berkshires. I lived in New York City for I don't know, 35 years or something. And then I kind of, had this place just as a place to escape to. And then I have at times just, lived there for, it's sort of gone back and forth between, which is my central home. It depends. Like I work in New York City quite a bit. I direct in the theater and I act in the theater. So when I'm, sometimes I'm there, and that's my central environment. And then other times I'm up in the countryside, which I also love. So
it struck me that the movie felt like sort of a love letter to that area, because it just, you just drink in those beautiful vistas and everything while you're watching it.
The Cape is about as far away as you can get from me and still be in the same state. I had actually never been on the Cape before, so that was a whole new experience for me. It's not far. It's about a 4-hour drive from where my place is, but I just had never been in that direction before. I had been to Martha's Vineyard, which is south of where we were, but I had never been up onto actually what they call the Cape Cod.
Gosh, it was just gorgeous. Did you actually get to cavort with any of the seals that we see on the screen, for instance?
Well,
I mean,
as much as what you see. I mean, I got to get fairly close to them, but you can't. It's very dangerous to actually be close to them in the water itself, because they're not that I think they would be particularly aggressive, but they, just with a casual flip of the tail, they could knock you unconscious. They weigh about 800 pounds. So, yeah.
I was getting a little worried about your character in the movie, because I was like, I don't want to see her get overcome with seals, overrun, But I'm also curious to know, like, the director, Alexander Janko, comes from a musical background, and has actually composed the score as well to the film, and I'm wondering, if you felt like there were any challenges in working with this was his first feature, I think. So, were there any challenges that you felt in terms of dealing with a first-time director, which I'm sure you've done before.
I have. I've actually worked with quite a few first-time directors. He was extraordinarily open and interesting and interested in his work with the act. And, I found, from really the very beginning, from early on when he cast me in the film and I started to have conversations with him and also with Joan Anderson, that there was a kind of, collaboratory quality that he had that you don't always find, particularly with first-time directors who can be so overwhelmed by the experience of doing their first film. But he was very, very open, and I think it may have come from, he has more of an experience of working with orchestras and with groups of people who really very much are collaborative in what they're doing. So I felt like there was some elements of that ran through the whole process. I mean, he let us be involved in work on the script in the first, weeks that we were doing the film. And of course he had a Pulitzer Prize winning playwright in Michael Christopher, who plays my husband. So
right.
He could turn to us at various times and help, rely on us to kind of try and find, an approach to the scene that was, it's very difficult to turn a book into a film. Books have a life of their own, and things can read very well, and then when you try to get them, down into a script where people are actually speaking things, you've got a whole new challenge.
Yeah, and especially I would imagine, I haven't read Joan Anderson's book, but I would imagine that a lot of it is very internal.
It is very, yeah. Yes, you're right. And as are many books. So I think it's always fascinating, the challenge of trying to take the internal quality of a lot of books and to bring that out into a more external, people speaking their thoughts as opposed to thinking them.
I've noticed over the past few years that there seems to be a plethora of films these days telling the story of, women of a certain age, shall we say, and I mean, from things like Sally Field's performance and Hello, My Name is Doris, to Blythe Danner in I'll See You in My Dreams and so forth. Are you sensing that there's a sort of a sea change in terms of people being audiences being more interested in these kind of stories? With these kind of
I imagine that. Yeah, I mean, I think that there should at the very least be these kind of films available so that, people in their 50s and 60s and 70s aren't completely stuck watching Marvel comic book movies because, honestly, they have a limited appeal. So, I honestly do believe that this baby boomer generation is a great audience for films because we didn't grow up staring at, movies on our iPads, and we didn't, we liked to go in and sit down and watch a film in a theater, and it's a tradition for us. It has, not any tradition at all for a lot of kids. I mean, they've grown up watching movies, on their laptops. So I think that, it's interesting, and I also have to say, on my part as an actress of a certain age, we really would like to continue working, and we would like to play roles that aren't just the dotty old aunt or something, where where you really actually have a character that has some real layered, complex life and has a story to tell. So. I think that it seems good. It seems good to have these kind of choices.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad they're out there. Personally, my focus is in movies about people. Those are the movies that I really like more than movies about plot, I guess. And so
or movies about space aliens or
yes.
people people with like strange superpowers or something.
Yeah, what I call them is suit movies, because if you don't have the suit, you don't have a movie. So it's like,
yes, yes, exactly.
I get very tired of those. And in that same spirit, well, one other question in connection with Year by the Sea, when I look back at your first 10 years in movies, one of your most productive periods in your career in terms of film, at least. When I look back at those and I see titles like The Wanderers and Animal House and Small Circle of Friends, which is a favorite of mine, or even Starman. It seems like in those days you were definitely in that realm of like you were hanging out with the boys pretty much in a lot of those movies. And one thing that's different in this is that you're really hanging out with the girls this time, and with Esther Murkison and Celia Emery and so forth.
Yeah.
Was that a new experience? Did that feel? I mean, I know you've had a lot of experience since those first 10 years. But did that feel fresh in terms of doing a feature?
Well, I'm just you have me suddenly thinking like, what other films have I done where I've worked with a lot of other women? I know that there have been, and certainly in the theater, I've done plays in the theater that were all women in the play, but it's nice, that feminine energy. Yeah, I have to say I absolutely loved working with Apetha and Celia, and there is a I would say just since I started making films, there is a growing sort of femininity in the film world, whether it's in terms of the stories, but also in terms of the crews. I mean, the crews were almost entirely masculine when I started making films. And now, often there will be, women in positions that I never use. I mean, women cinematographers and women on the actual, camera crew, and women in sound, and women in, all kinds of areas that you just never saw women before. So it's become a much more balanced world. Which I really enjoy. I mean, it was very. I did some films where I was occasionally the only woman in a crew, in a group of 100 people that were traveling. I mean, in Raiders of the Lost Ark, there was only one other woman in the film, and she was only on screen for about 2 minutes. And, our crew was largely, I think there was a person in the costume department who was a woman, and, there were maybe 2 or 3 women on the entire crew. But it's changed radically now. And it's great.
Yeah, it's got to happen. It's got to happen. I've been saying on the show for a long time that we need to have more female-centric stories because it feels like the storytelling in the feature film world has gotten a little, for me, it's gotten a little dull and a little samey, I guess, and that's because they're all stories told by men.
Yeah, and they also move in the realm of extreme violence a lot. I feel like, I feel like our world doesn't really need more films about people killing each other. It's yes, it's a part of our reality, but I just, I've gotten to a point where, You know, just like I cannot sit and watch another 2.5-hour film where I see 1,200 people dismembered and shot. You know, it's like at what point do we just say enough? You know, like enough. I can't cope with this anymore. So
funny.
I'm trying to find stories that really have more to do with ways in which we want to live as opposed to ways in which we, you know, don't want to live. You know,
I was just talking on the show about a movie that I watched recently from Japan, from Hirokazu Koreeda. The movie is called Our Little Sister, and it's great. If you haven't seen it, you got to watch it. It's the exact type of movie you're talking about.
Oh, great!
It's wonderful. But I was watching it, and I was thinking, gosh, this reminds me that the movies that come from America, even some of the independent movies, many independent movies, as a matter of fact, are sort of miserablest kind of movies. You know, they're kind of like, how much misery can we heap on people, you know, on the viewer? And then here's a movie that's really, it's not without conflict. It does have conflict, but it has an overwhelming sweetness to it. That and a kind of a camaraderie between the characters that's not interrupted by any kind of meanness or anything. At least not abject meanness. I'm like, why can't we have more movies like this made here in America?
I would ask the same question. And when one does come along, you know what just leapt into my mind is a film which I loved, which was called Lars and the Real Girl, which was early Ryan Gosling film, and the performances in it are so beautiful, and everything about the script is incredible. And it was about loss, you know, it was about a person struggling to deal with this enormous loss in their life. And I think when films like that are made, somehow or other, the people they don't know how to sell a film like that. They don't know how to convey to people that this is a film that they want to see. And you know, that film they sold so ridiculously because they tried to sort of make it about the blow up doll, and it really didn't have very much to do with the blow-up doll. I mean, the blow-up doll was an aspect. Yes, exactly. It wasn't at all the film that they were trying to. I mean, it's like almost like the people who were selling the film didn't really even understand the film they were trying to sell.
I do get that impression from the marketing departments that they cannot hook on to anything, any type of film like we're talking about. Like, you know, they cannot figure it out. You know, I guess it's easier to sell.
Well, it's that horrible thing that they say in the news. You know, if it bleeds, it leads. You know, and I feel like that's how they deal with films as well. And I want to think that we're, you know, that you know, we can start refusing to go to films like that. That you know, if they're just going to make sensationalist films or films where it's just about cars crashing into each other or people shooting each other, then, you know, at some point people are just going to get fed up and stop supporting them.
I also dislike this whole, and this comes from, you know, film fans, this whole notion that a movie that doesn't have explosions and car crashes is a movie that you don't have to go see on the big screen. That you can wait till it comes to your home screen. But what I say to those people is, well, when you go to a movie, you're supposed to put your life on hold and make a commitment to the film to get lost in it. And for years, it was easy for people to get lost in something like Kramer versus Kramer or Ordinary People or something, and to see that consider that a big screen movie. You know, it's incumbent upon our you know, on the viewers to to put their life on hold. If you're watching a movie at home, often what gets put on hold is the movie, in order so you can do things that are life related. But
no. We have turned into a culture of very short attention spans, and it's I think there are a lot of things that go into having created that. I'm very hopeful that we can turn that around, and that people will finally get tired of having such short attention spans. And so,
yes. I'm wondering
stressful.
when it's going to happen. I'm hoping it's going to happen soon. But with that, I want to talk a little bit about some of the movies that you probably never gotten asked about. I know you go to comic conventions and so forth, and sci-fi conventions and whatever. And usually I would imagine you get asked about, of course, Raiders of the Lost Ark and the Indiana Jones series, and also Starman, and probably Animal House as well. But I'm sure no one ever asks you about something like the Glass Menagerie, which I think you're fantastic in.
People actually do, and I've gone to play. I go to a lot of film festivals because I've been helping promote Year by the Sea, which was at film festivals last year, and this year I have a short film that I directed, and I've been at a lot of festivals. But Glass Menagerie actually is one of those films that gets screened, and I get asked to come and sort of talk about it. Quite often. So but I love that film, and I had a blast doing it.
What were your impressions of Paul Newman as a director? I'm curious to know, to hear about that aspect of the movie.
Well, he was really, one of my favorite directors to have worked with, and I. It was just a privilege to be able to do that play with him, and he had known that play for a very long time, had worked with Tennessee Williams, as had I and Joanne, and Joanne Woodward and I had done the play together twice on stage, so we were showing up to first day's rehearsal kind of very already steeped in the experience of having done the play together. So we got to work with him in a way that actors very rarely get to work with a director, which was, from day one, we knew the play already, we knew our lines already, so we got to really work on all kinds of internal things that the characters were going through, and he was just fantastic to work with. He understands the whole process of acting, and had been for, I don't know, at that point, maybe 40 years an actor, and had directed Joanne before, so they had a kind of beautiful, ability to work together almost, with sign language in a sense. Where they hardly needed to speak. He could just give her a certain look or a certain little hand sign or something when they were working, and she knew what he was communicating. But he was very positive, extremely supportive, really took time and gave us lots of time to try things and experiment. He wanted us to, he and Joanne both, just there because of their actors' studio training, they both worked from a place of just wanting to really be in the moment and create in the moment, which not all directors even understand that exists as a way of working. But so we all speak the same language, and that was a very special experience. I'm
now realizing that there's connection here between you and working with Paul Newman and Michael Christopher, who also worked with him, I guess, because they did the Shadow Box together.
Shadow Box together.
Right?
That's right.
Yeah.
I forgot that. Yeah. Yeah, they did. Yeah,
did you,
there's
so
all
you guys
kinds of,
didn't.
yes.
You guys didn't had you known Michael Christopher before? I would imagine.
In fact, I had met him through Joanne. So the first time I met Michael Christopher was probably 25 years ago, and it was probably I think we did a screening of Glass Menagerie at a theater that Michael was involved with as a playwright, and I had dinner at Michael's house, and that was the first time that I met him. And then we had probably crossed paths 4 or 5 times since then, and I was delighted when I heard that he was going to play my husband. He was so great to work with. He's become a friend, and I think the world of him.
He acts very rarely, right? Or am I wrong about that?
Oh no, he's on Miss. No, he acts all the time. He's in a lot of films, and he's on a show right now called Mr. Robot, which I have not seen, but is very popular.
Okay, so I do have to ask an Indiana Jones related question, which is the new Indiana Jones film. Is that happening? Do you know anything about it?
I am totally not the right person to ask about this. I mean, occasionally I will read something about it, or somebody will send me something that they've read about it. I just read an article today about it. I think it appears to be, planned to happen. And other than that, I have no idea whether I will be a part of it, because I think, they'll tell me one way or another at a certain point when they decide to tell me. I don't know. It's, they like to keep everything very, very close under wraps, and they, it's a process that's shrouded in mystery as to whether or not the script is finished or not finished, or who's in it, or who's. Although I did read the paper a couple of weeks ago. They announced that Shia is not going to be in the film. So
right.
I don't know what origin of that is, or whose decision that was, or
so you get kept in the dark just like the rest
as much
of us.
as me. Yeah,
well,
I do. Short of somebody calling me and telling me, I know as much as anybody else. Just from like reading something will pop up on the internet or whatever. But that's about it.
Well, the other day, Jeff Bridges expressed an interest in doing a sequel to Starman. Is that something that would? Do you know anything about that? Or
he and I have been talking about this for years, and he and I maybe 15 years ago did a little bit of sleuthing around to see if we could figure out whether or not the rights were available. And because the rights are a little complicated to Starman because of the fact that it was turned into a television series after the film was made.
Right.
It gets into some like little tricky wickets or something in terms of figuring out all of that. But he and I, every time I see him, which is, where our little paths will cross from time to time, because I went to see his band a couple of years ago. It was so great. But we're always kind of talking about it, but whether or not that will happen. I mean, everybody's asks me about it all the time, like, where is that baby? I want to know who that baby became. And,
That's
in
true.
Starman, he says to me, he will become a great teacher, so people right now, they're aching, to know who that teacher would be, and if that teacher can come and save us from the complete chaos that we're living in right now. So I don't know if somebody has the ability to write it. It certainly would be an extremely fascinating sequel to make, because when you think about the end of the film, I'm left there with that silver ball in my hand, and I'm left there, impregnated and by a being from another world, and you almost can't think of anything that would make for a more interesting sequel, but
yeah,
for some reason
no
one has really pursued it.